Ah, there she is. Are you ready, Judy?
I'm absolutely ready.
Okay, I think we'll make a start. So good evening, everybody. I hope you're all well. Thank you so much for joining us for this really unique and very special event. I'm delighted that we at the BS here are hosting this event. This event is called To Life, Healthy Jewish Food, with Judy Rose and Dr. Jackie Lewis. And they have a new book out by the same title, To Life, Healthy Jewish Food, inspired by their dear late mother, the well-known and much-loved Evelyn Rose. So I was thinking about this idea of healthy Jewish food. And to me, it sounds a bit like an oxymoron, the words healthy and Jewish food in it. Because if you think about the traditional Jewish foods, very few of them that we know of, well, hopefully we'll learn this evening, actually our perceptions are wrong, are necessarily healthy. And, we think that, we have the laws of kashrut, the laws of kosher food, what we can eat, what we can't eat. And people say, well, that shows how healthy we are as Jews. And I always say, well, people say the reason why we can't eat a pig is because a pig is a dirty animal. I said, well, I've never seen a cow take a shower. So the fact that we can eat beef but we can't eat pork is no way a proof that for the laws of kashrut. In fact, the rabbis tell us there are many reasons for the laws of kashrut. None of them particularly have anything to do with physical health necessarily. They definitely have to do with spiritual health. And we know that the two are definitely important. In fact, the Torah in another place deals with the importance and the requirement and the imperative of physical health. It says, we have to guard our souls very carefully. And that, the rabbis say, is the imperative for not only for living a healthy life and obviously eating in a healthy way. Now, we know that food is a huge part of Jewish life, and all of our festivals, the whole Jewish calendar is centered around the different foods that we have at different times of year, and those festivals are synonymous with food. In fact, there's that well-known joke that we can summarize all of the Jewish festivals by saying very simply, they tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. And I know the more I talk, the less we are going to have a chance to see the food, and we can't taste it. We can virtually taste it. We can't even smell it, unfortunately, but I'm sure it's going to look wonderful, and we can all go and try it. We're currently in the 9 days. This is a sad part of the Jewish calendar in which, according to Jewish law, we're not allowed to eat meat or drink wine except on Shabbat. And therefore, that really restricts our diet. For some people who are the real carnivores amongst us, who really enjoy their meat, find it a real struggle. And that is why I'm delighted this evening that Judy and Jackie are going to be showing us a perfect milky recipe that we can all enjoy during the 9 days. Okay, so as I said, I'm delighted to welcome Judy and Jackie. I'm not going to speak anymore. I'm going to hand over to them, and first to thank them for joining us. Again, just to remind you, please, there's going to be plenty of time for any questions you want to ask them. We've already had a quick show and tell of the Evelyn Rose's cookbook. So if you've got your own, go and grab a copy and hold it up to the screen. You get more brownie points for that. But without further ado, delighted to be able to pass on to them. And I said, if you have questions, please put them in the chat facility, and there will be plenty of time for them to answer them at the end. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Jackie first, yes?
Judy. Thank you, Rabbi. Okay. So by way of introduction, I'm Judy Rose, daughter of Evelyn Rose, cousin of Jackie Rose, and welcome to my kitchen.
And I'm Dr. Jackie Rose. I'm a GP with a special interest in nutrition. About 5-6 years ago, I was in a North Manchester kosher cafe, and I saw the chef was tipping a bag of sugar into a pot of soup. I said, what on earth are you doing? There may be people eating here who've got diabetes, who don't expect to have sugar in their soup. And I wouldn't want extra sugar, any sugar in my soup, thank you very much, as well. He said he'd just put it there for the flavor. This got me started in thinking about healthy eating, giving talks about healthy eating, and then I approached Judy to discuss the possibility of a healthy Jewish cookery book. It's taken us 5 years of work and research, and it's finally come to fruition. And here it is, and we're just so very, very proud of it. So back to you, Judy.
Thank you, Jackie. So Jackie and I both grew up in Manchester. We're actually in kindergarten together. But now, despite that, I have a very soft spot for the Boreham Wood and Elstree part of the world. When I first left university, I got a job with the BBC, and as I'm sure you know, being local, BBC has studios in Elstree where they make none other than EastEnders. And I had a lowly job on Tomorrow's World, but what you may not know is that at the Elstree BBC studios, they also train all their cameramen and directors. And they were looking for people to be kind of pretend presenters because they couldn't afford the real thing. So I would troll up and down up to Elstree and pretty much pretend to be Judith Hann, presenting little items on Tomorrow's World so the trainee directors could have a go. And I would be trolling around Albert Square outside the Queen Vic with a robot following me, attempting to be a Tomorrow's World presenter. However, back to my day job. So as the rabbi said, it's the 9 days. We have an absolutely delicious, milky vegetarian dish tonight, one of our favorites from the book. It's called hortopita. It's a Greek Jewish pie. Traditionally, it would be made with wild greens, and the women of the hillsides on the Greek islands would go out collecting dandelions and sorrel and whatever wild herbs they could find. A little tricky in this part of the world to find the wild greens, although there's a few nettles in my garden. So we like to use chard. If you have a go yourself and you can't get chard, spinach is fine, frozen spinach, whatever works for you. So we have demonstrated some recipes recently by Zoom, and people found it a little hard to see the details of what we're doing. So calling on my days as a BBC director and producer, because I never became a presenter, I have put together, with my husband's help, a video just showing, well, I basically just recorded what I would normally do making my hortopita, but we're able to get some close-ups in as well. So I'm hoping that will give you a chance to see a little bit more clearly how the process works. And it'll also give me a chance to see you and answer some of your questions by chat. So we're going to do it in sections. We're going to start by making the filling for our hortopita, and then Jackie will tell us a little bit about why the ingredients are healthy and how they're good for you. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I am going to play the video. It's only a couple of minutes.
All right, so number one, we've got our spring onions here. I'm going to separate the roots. There we go. And what my mum used to call the fashimilty bits. Do you know what a fashimilty is? It's like the drobioshkis. It's cousin of drobioshkis. So I'm going to separate the green from the white. Here I've got my white parts. Here I've got my green. And green is really like a herb. Think of it as more of a sort of chive substitute, whereas the white is more like an onion. So I'm just going to, a little bit of the green there, doesn't really matter. I'm going to pop that into some olive oil that I've just been warming up here. There it goes. My greens, I'm going to snip, and I'm going to keep those separate.
The sound's gone. No sound.
Judy, can you speak over the video because the sound's not working? So sorry.
It's a rustic dish, hortopita. You may have heard of spanakopita, which means a pie made with spinach, and this one's hortopita, which is, to be slightly etymological, is the word for garden, like on horticulture. So that's where the root comes from. Right, so I've got my greens here. Going to do a little bit of a shuffle. You see that? Okay, there's our shuffling. Just turn that up a wee bit. Now, while my greens are cooking, I'm going to start on the next stage of the filling. So I've got a little bit of feta and an egg and a bowl. So I'm going to pop my feta into the bowl here, and I'm going to add my egg. There we go. And give it a little bit of a whisk up together. And now I'm going to start adding some seasoning. I mentioned that obviously Evelyn Rose was my mum, and I'm surrounded by things and equipment and stuff from my mum's kitchen. This is one of her pepper mills. I don't know if any of you, have anyone got her books? Probably a couple of you, right? So she always used to say 10 grinds of black pepper, and this is the very pepper mill that the 10 grinds came from. So of course we have to do 10 grinds. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And this is her nutmeg grinder. I love this. It's very incredibly retro. In our book, we use fresh dill, but I'm going to use a little bit of dried dill. Just will work out fine. So I've got my feta, my eggs, my cheese. Give this a bit more of a shuffle. If you're cooking along, don't worry, you can give it a little bit more time to cook. And if you're using spinach, you might find there's a little bit of liquid coming out. Don't worry about that, because what you can do is use what my mum used to call a runcible spoon. And you take your greens and just scoop them out and leave any liquid behind in the bottom. So I'm going to add that. Now, sometimes people say, oh, you know, feta's so salty. I actually like to use what's called salad cheese, which is a lot less salty. But if you're using authentic feta, a good way to reduce some of the salt is to soak it in a little bit of milk or water before you use it, because it's the brine that it's kept stored in that actually is what makes it salty. So there we go. I've got my, and I'm just going to throw in my green spring onions. Give it a little bit of a schmush, technical term we chefs use. And it's as simple as that. That is our filling for the hortopita. So Jackie, back to you.
I wanted to tell you all about the health benefits of our ingredients. So our eggs are a powerhouse of vitamins. They're rich in vitamins A, D, E, and K, all fantastic for your immunity. We're going to talk quite a lot about immunity today because of the coronavirus epidemic. And they also have fantastic minerals. They have selenium, a chemical called choline, which is really good for brain health. And they also have zinc. So eggs used to be out of favor. People worried about the cholesterol, but in fact, it's been shown that very little cholesterol translates into a rise in blood cholesterol. You don't see this by eating eggs, and the need to have an egg white omelette, for example, has gone out the window because the yolk is the best part. Moving on to the spinach greens or the Swiss chard, these are also really high in a range of vitamins. Vitamin A in particular, which is fantastic for immunity. They also have calcium, magnesium, and potassium, all of which help to lower blood pressure. So they're very good for heart health. And our feta cheese, that's surprisingly low in calories, and it also has calcium. So again, helping blood pressure and also helping against osteoporosis. I'm going to now screen share, so please bear with me for this. So when I grew up, I used to be told that it's a good thing to eat your greens, and it turned out that that was really, really good advice. And here we have an illustration from the book. All the photos in the book are taken by Judy's husband, Mark Gerstein, and they're all fantastic. So green veg are high in folic acid, for example, which is really good for your heart and for brain health. On here, we've got cauliflower, broccoli, pak choi, and kale. All of these are known as cruciferous vegetables. They're related to cabbage, and they have an anti-inflammatory effect. They also are helpful in prevention of cancer, so really important. Inflammation is also something you want to avoid when you're trying to have your immune system in best functioning. So snuck in at the corner of the picture, there's some mushrooms, and in fact mushrooms are high in selenium, which, as I mentioned, is also important for your immunity. I'll go into that in more detail in the second half of the presentation. So because of these health benefits, Judy and I tried to include lots of greens in the book. So here we have our wild rocket soup with mint and petit pois. We have a emerald shakshuka, a little bit different to the usual tomato one. I tend to call this green eggs, no ham, which will make sense to those of you who've been brought up on Dr. Seuss. And here we've got a picture of our lovely vegetables from the beginning of the talk, the Swiss chard. I apologise that the sound went off for part of Judy's presentation. So if you want to ask her afterwards to fill in some of the gaps, please do, though I think some of it was self-evident, and the recipe is available on our website, which is tolifebooks.com. Here we have California winter salad in red, green and gold, which has got oranges and pineapple in it, and it's got a walnut dressing and added walnuts on top. This is one of my favorites. It can be mixed with a little bit of mayonnaise to make it quite creamy if one prefers. So you don't have to only go for greens for good health. It's been shown that purple fruit and vegetables are high in really potent antioxidants known as anthocyanins. And these are fantastic for your heart and for your brain, for prevention of dementia even. So here I've got a picture of our jeweled chocolate discs with pomegranate for the purple fruit, and also slivers of pistachio and pecan nuts. Because of the health benefits of purple fruit and veg, I tend to choose, for example, red onions when possible, red cabbage, have a lot of aubergine in my cooking, and beetroots. Beetroots are absolutely brilliant. They happen to be from the same family as spinach and chard. So definitely choose purple fruits and veg where you can. So we wondered if at this stage whether any of you might have any preliminary questions, that maybe we could take a couple of questions from the floor before we go on to putting the Hortopita together. Rabbi Chapa, do you want to see if anyone's interested?
Yeah, Sharon has a question straight away.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about aubergines. I was told a while ago that aubergines being part of the nightshade vegetables, is it, that are not necessarily so healthy and also can be quite inflammatory. Is that right, or is that not right?
It's, thank you. It's half right. Aubergines are indeed part of the nightshade family, so I'm very impressed with your knowledge, and that's together with other vegetables such as tomatoes and bell peppers. However, most people are absolutely fine with these vegetables. In fact, they're really high in nutritional value. Just some people find that they're a bit sensitive. Some people, for example, who suffer from arthritis, find that if they reduce these, that they get less symptoms. But majority of us can and should ideally eat these vegetables. So your aubergine, as well as being really high in anthocyanins, especially if you include the skin, they also have their antioxidant is called nasonin. They're great for brain health. They've been shown to help reduce risk of dementia. So as long as you're not one of those people who finds that they get sore joints when they eat a lot of these, then I'd say go for it. I certainly eat them routinely, and for people who like a low carb diet, they find having dishes like moussaka can be really helpful, using thin slices of aubergine instead of potatoes to reduce the amount of carbs in the diet. Have we another question, Rabbi?
Great question. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for answering, Jackie. Anybody else? So there's a question on the chat here. Shall I read it out for you, Jackie? It says here, my daughter's developed an egg allergy, which has caused problems with milk and vegetarian dishes. Is there an alternative that can be used? Great question.
That is a great question.
I can speak to that one, Jackie, if you want.
Okay, Judy, go on.
Well, first of all, there are some very good vegan cheeses out now. One of the benefits of the fact that veganism is such a widespread phenomenon rather than a niche is that there are some very, very good alternatives. In terms of dairy, you can cook most things that you could cook with regular milk, you can cook with soya milk or coconut milk or almond milk. So depending on if you have any allergies to nuts, but I find any of those work really well and can be a very good alternative. And in many cases, you can just simply miss out cheese. We're making our hortopita, as you saw, with feta, but actually what you can do is instead of the cheese, you can either use vegan feta, which yes, it exists, like healthy Jewish, it's not an oxymoron, or you can just miss it out and replace it with some sauteed mushrooms and a little bit of, well, as Jackie said, a little bit of red onion, even some pine nuts. So there's lots of ways around it. And actually in the book, we have quite a lot of vegan recipes and substitutes for foods that have, dairy foods in if you need to switch out.
And from point of view of the choline, that there are other sources of choline available. So we have more details about this in the book, but I don't think there's anything that can exactly take the place of eggs really in your dishes. It's just finding other, as Judy said, vegan recipes that can work for you. So Judy, back to you.
Thanks, Jackie. And sources of calcium is obviously important if you're not taking traditional dairy products. Rabbi, shall we move on, or is there another burning question?
Yes, we're in your hands.
Okay, and here are my hands. So these very hands are now going to show you how to fill our hortopita. So we've made our filling. We've got our, just to remind you, we've got our gently cooked spring onions. We've got that chard chopped up, and we've got the feta and the seasonings from the Evelyn Rose nutmeg and pepper grinder. These are very useful tools to have in your kitchen, actually. You may think they're esoteric, but they're actually very handy. So I'm going to play my next little clip, give you a chance to see the close-ups, and then I'll hand back to Jackie to talk a little bit more about healthy eating in the time of COVID.
So I've got some filo pastry here, got my first sheet, And traditionally, when you use feeler pastry, there's two things you need to remember. One is that it dries out really quickly. So you want to get covering it with either a little bit of water, little spritzer here, got a quick spritz of that, but also because feeler is only made with flour and water, it's going to need a little bit of oil to become delicious and brown. So I'm going to spritz it with a little bit of olive oil. Now, traditionally, you would melt butter, you'd slosh it on with your brush, and it would all be kind of covered with melted butter. But we think it's a little healthier to do the olive oil spritzer, in fact, a lot healthier. So I'm just going to do a little spritz, particularly at the edges, because that's where it tends to get dry first. So that's my first one. I've got another one here, number 2, and the same thing. You know, I learned to cook when I was probably about the height of this counter. And of course, it was my mom teaching me. The first thing I learned to cook was lemon pavlova. And my mom used to be standing at the old mixer and I would be adding the ingredients. And the second thing she taught me to cook was luscious lemon cake. Famous Evelyn Rose recipe. Probably some of you have made that, tasted it. But what you may not know is that luscious lemon cake, my mum, Evelyn Rose, was the very first person to introduce that into the UK. And it later became known as lemon drizzle cake. So Evelyn Rose was the author of the famous lemon drizzle cake, which is now ubiquitous. So that was one of my earliest culinary adventures. I'm going to do one more sheet with my feeler. Here we go. Spritz, spritz, spritz. And again, I'm doing the edges first because those are the more susceptible to drying out. There we go. So I'm going to start by making a pie, a traditional hotopita. And we're going to also do some triangles and some spirals, but let's do our pie first. So this is my half-size tin. If you're doing it for a full quantity, then you would use like a 25 centimeter, 10-inch tin, but this is a little baby tin. So I'm going to take my pieces here, and because it's a half quantity, I'm going to cut my feeler in half. And because it's rustic and really casual, you don't want to be sort of too worried about making it perfect or neat. So I'm going to take my sheets here. I'm just going to sort of separate them out a little bit and overlap them a bit like this, so that some are at one angle, some are at another, and then just tuck them in a little bit like that. Ooh, let's use the other guys up as well. There we go. I've got my feeler in there. I'm going to take our lovely filling with our chard. So I'm just going to take that, pop him in here. There we go, spread it out. There we are. And although I said feta can be a little bit salty, if you just add a little pinch of salt when you're cooking your greens, they'll stay lovely and green. I did that when you weren't looking. So you can see how beautiful and green my greens are. And now we're going to just mold in the top a little bit. We've got that extra piece there. We don't need him. So I'm going to see if I can do this so you can see clearly. So I'm just going to gently crumple up the edges like this. So it forms a sort of crinkly top. Yeah, you can cover the whole thing completely, bring it in all the way, like a traditional pie. But I think it's kind of fun to have a little bit of an opening in the middle like that. And then what we're going to do is just put a little bit of sesame seed on the top, just for fun. And actually, one of my favorite things is black sesame. You can also use onion seeds, which are called kalonji, and just add a little bit of those for some contrast. And because we haven't spritzed the bottom of the feeler, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a smush here. There we go. So that is the beginning of our pie. So I'm going to put him over here, ready for the oven. So let's take our sheets again, our feeler, give them another spritz, 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 spritz. Oh, I think I've got 2. There we go. This time, instead of using the single sheets or cut them in half this way, I'm going to divide them in half horizontally like this into 3 strips. So now I've got a long, thin piece. I'm going to take my first long, thin piece, give it a little bit more spritz. You can never have too much spritzing. Anyone ever made samosas? It's the same principle. So I'm going to take my filling here.
Guys, I'm going to jump in there. Can you, have you been catching that, or have you been watching it on the screen?
We had it up to the point where you filled the phyllo.
Right.
And we had
Okay.
the audio, but the video froze.
Okie doke. Let's let me just get that back for you. Sorry about the technology here. Just one moment. There we are. So you saw me fill it and form it, yes? Okie doke. So let me just get back to that point. There we go. Let's pick it up here. Okay.
Although I said feta can be a little bit salty, if you just add a little pinch of salt when you're cooking your greens, they'll stay lovely and green. I did that when you weren't looking. So you can see how beautiful and green my greens are. And now we're going to just mold in the top a little bit. We've got that extra piece there. We don't need him. So I'm going to see if I can do this so you can see clearly. So I'm just going to gently crumple up the edges like this. So it forms a sort of crinkly top. Yeah, you can cover the whole thing completely, bring it in all the way, like a traditional pie. But I think it's kind of fun to have a little bit of a opening in the middle like that. And then what we're going to do is just put a little bit of sesame seed on the top, just for fun. And actually, one of my favorite things is black sesame. You could also use onion seeds, which are called kalonji, and just add a little bit of those for some contrast. And because we haven't spritzed the bottom of the feeler, just going to give it a little bit of a smush here. There we go. So that is the beginning of our pie. So I'm going to put him over here, ready for the oven. So let's take our sheets again, our feeler, give them another spritz, 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 spritz. Oh, I think I've got two. There we go. This time, instead of using the single sheets or cut them in half this way, I'm going to divide them in half horizontally like this into 3 strips. So now I've got a long thin piece. I'm going to take my first long thin piece, give it a little bit more spritz. You can never have too much spritzing. Has anyone ever made samosas? It's the same principle. So I'm going to take my filling here, and a little bit goes in the corner like that. Now I'm going to turn it over like this into a triangle. So I've got one corner like that, then it goes up and over again, back down to me, again over. There's a diagram in the book if you are not good at geometry, but there we go, back over like that, back, and then tuck the last little bit in like that. So there's your triangle. Right, boys, let's put you over here, ready to go with our pie. And then last but not least, we're going to do a spiral. Now, the triangles are great if you want to do a little nibbly thing, you know, with a drink or something like that, just a little kind of bite-sized thing. The spirals are great if you want to do an individual serving for lunch with a salad or something like that. So never have too much spritz, as I said. Okay, number 2 goes on top. And you can build this up as many times as you need. Depends on your feeler. Some feelers are a lot thicker than others. I'm just going to go with 3 layers for this. Ooh, come here, number 3. Let's just split you up. There we go. The reason you do multiple layers with feeler is because you need the structure. Feeler is very delicate. And if you only have a couple of layers, you might find the whole thing falls apart. But because with a spiral, you're rolling it up, you actually end up with a little bit more structure. So I've got my layers. I'm going to take my filling. There we are. And this time I'm spreading it out in a layer. I'm going to switch to a fork because I think that's a little easier just to sort of spread it. Out we go. Oh, we can see that ruby chard. Beautiful. So pretty. There we go. So I've got my little line there. And now I'm going to tuck in the ends like that. And if you're doing this along with me, I'll slow down a little bit. So tuck in one end, tuck in the other end, and then up and over. Roll it up like that. A little bit over again. Just squeeze it gently. And now I've got what's effectively a cylinder. There we go. Little quick spritz just to moisten it, because I can feel it's getting a tiny bit dry. And I did just want to mention a trick. If you find when you're filling your pastry that the filling seems a little bit glompy, what I like to do is just take a pair of scissors, not obviously the ones you use in your office, but kitchen scissors, and I just snip through it like that, and it just breaks up those little bits of leaves and schmutzy stuff, so it's a little bit easy to work with. So one of the most important tools in the kitchen are your kitchen shears, I think. Anyway, back to our cylinder. So now we've got our feeler, we've got a tubey thing, and we're just going to sort of roll it around now. In fact, I'll do it like this so you can see it a little bit more easily. So you just spiral it, coil it like that. There it is. And now you have your autopita spiral. Simple as that. So I'm going to put it with my other dies here. So I've got my spiral, I've got my triangles, and I've got my little pie, and they can all bake at the same temperature at the same time. The finishing touch with my spirals and my triangles is just like before, a little bit of spritz and a little bit of sesame. I like to kind of go heavy on the sesame on the spiral, and a little bit less on my triangles, and then a little bit of the black sesame just for fun. There we go. So that's it. Now we have our autopitas 3 ways. I'm going to get those in the oven, and I'm going to hand back to Jackie.
Thank you, Judy. So our book was written just before the coronavirus. It was completed before the coronavirus reared its head. But it turned out that a lot of the advice in the book was extremely pertinent to helping boost your immunity, meaning that if one of us is unlucky enough to catch the virus, that you'd have the better chance of a good outcome. So it's because in the book we give information on how you may lose weight, how to reduce your chance of getting diabetes, or if you have diabetes, how to reverse diabetes, how to reduce the risk of ischemic heart disease. There's a wonderful nutritionist, Professor Philip Calder of the Nutrition Society, and he's actually given me bits of advice for the book. And he is now one of the main experts on diet for boosting the immune system and for coronavirus to help one combat that. So what he has said is that most important is to have a wide range of vitamins in your diet, vitamins A through to E, particularly concentrating on vitamin D there. Then you want selenium, zinc, iron, plenty of protein, and probiotics, which is your fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut. These are all helpful. In addition, Professor Calder, he actually specializes in fish oils, and in preliminary research, it's looking likely that oily fish, things like salmon, mackerel, herring, tuna, sardines, that these all, because of the omega-3 that they provide, they help reduce inflammation and may reduce the risk, if someone has a COVID infection, of them having the cytokine storm, this really serious exacerbation in the end stages of a coronavirus infection. There's been news in the press about a medication called dexamethasone. Dexamethasone is an anti-inflammatory drug, and so if through your diet you can improve the anti-inflammatory, the natural anti-inflammatories, then that's got to be a good thing. So for our book, I'm going to screen share again. We feature highly the Mediterranean diet, or as we like to call it, the Israeli kibbutz style diet. And obviously, Hortopita, that as I described it, has a lot of the key nutrients that Professor Calder recommended. When he's been questioned about what would be a suitable diet overall to help provide these nutrients, he said the Mediterranean diet was just the kind of thing he was talking about. So in addition to the ingredients of our Hortopita, a Mediterranean diet features highly things like whole grains, all sorts of fruit and vegetable, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, and extra virgin olive oil is a key part, which also has great anti-inflammatory properties. If I concentrate on two components, then I would take maybe the nuts, because these are high in zinc and selenium, so absolutely fabulous. Plus monounsaturated fat, which is great for your heart. And from your herbs and spices, ginger, because this is high in zinc. So now I tend to add a cube of fresh root ginger to my green tea for the antioxidants, together with a slice of lemon, and I try and have that every day. What I definitely wouldn't have is sugar in my tea, because sugar and white carbs, and by that I mean white bread, white rice, white pasta, white potatoes, they all have an inflammatory effect. So going in the wrong direction when most of the constituents of the Mediterranean diet are helping us to combat inflammation. Another way I would describe chronic inflammation is a little bit as though in a city, if you had lots of small fires that kept breaking out all around the city regularly, then your fire service would be very stretched. So when a large fire arose, in this case coronavirus, then your fire service, or in our case immune system, would be less up to the job, less able to cope. From our book, we also have this Mediterranean triangle. So these are the kind of foods that I've been discussing. However, now there's even a move towards a low carb form of the Mediterranean diet. So I said that the white rice, white bread, etc. were not good. Whole grains are far better, far more nutritious, but in a low carb diet, which can be helpful for people who need to lose weight or to reverse diabetes, for example, or even reverse pre-diabetes, reducing even these healthier carbohydrates in the diet, just in quantities, can be really helpful. So how might you Mediterraneanize your diet, if you like? Let me just stop the screen share. You could choose to throw some greens, some spinach, some eggs, some mushrooms into your shopping bag at your regular shop. Perhaps you're going to have shakshuka or scrambled eggs instead of cereal or toast for breakfast in the morning. If you do have a slice of whole grain toast, maybe don't have the jam, the marmalade, or the honey. Don't have these sweet things. Instead, go for a low sugar peanut butter or almond butter. And you may choose to ideally take a handful of nuts and have that as a snack instead of biscuits or sweets. Would be far, far better. These are all simple steps, kind of painless changes that can help your immunity. So I'm going to pass back to Judy to show where we're up to with our Hortopita. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Jackie. By the miracle of technology, our Hortopita has been in the oven and is about to be revealed. So hold tight. Here we go. Hortopita, part 2. Part 3.
My Hortopita is in the oven, so in a moment I'm just going to run over and pull them out. But in the meantime, I want to show you how to make a delicious, super simple sauce to go with it. It's really, it's what the Greeks would call tzatziki. So it's Greek yogurt with a little bit of garlic, mint, and a little bit of, if you want, some dill and some black pepper. That's so simple. And then we throw in a little bit of cucumber, but you could use beetroot if you want. It's very, very flexible. So I've got a little bit of beautiful Greek yogurt here, and I'm going to take my garlic. The best way, by the way, to get the skin off garlic and to crush it is you just take off the little bit of tail there, that little bit of hard stuff. And then, this is a good way to vent your frustration. You take the side of your knife and you just go whack like that, and then you'll find the skin comes off super easily like that. So now I've got my garlic. I'm just going to, actually, you can chop it, but it's even easier to just pop it in a press like that. Garlic press. Now that is one of my must-have, not exactly an ingredient, but a piece of equipment. So I'm going to pop that in there, take the garlic, and then I've got a little bit of cucumber. I'm going to just slice him up, that, stack him up, and make some little dice, cucumber dice. There we go, in goes dice. So we got the garlic, the cucumber. Just grabbed a bit of mint from the garden while Jackie was telling you about the wonders of the Mediterranean diet. So got a little bit of mint here. Actually, I think we'll just slice that up. The best way to chop herbs, I think, is for tender leaf herbs anyway, like that. You just kind of bunch them up in a little bit of a kind of bundle like that, and then slice through them in little slivers. Technically, that's a chiffonade. And then if you think that's a bit too coarse, you just go chop, 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 chop. And you have nicely chopped mint. There we go. And that's pretty much it, actually. Let me just, now you can add, as I said, a little bit of beetroot, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of, oh, let's add a bit of dill, why not? A little bit of fresh dill. And that is all it is. It's so simple. And that's our tzatziki, which goes so beautifully with the Hortopita. Now, let me just clear this guy's out of the way. And I want to just show you a really easy salad to go with it. So I've just got some, oops, go away. I've got some baby gem. This is a purple baby gem. I've cut up a little bit of red pepper to go with it. I'm going to add some yellow pepper, and I've saved that because I just want to show you what I find is the easiest way to trim a pepper. So I just take off his head like that, and that leaves you with the inside of the pepper, and you just essentially follow the lines of the seeds, and you end up with a core that is what, again, my mum would call drobioshki, and just take off the little bit of the white there. So now I've got my pieces, stack them up. I'm all about efficiency, and just slice them nice and thinly like that. There we go. So we're going to add that to our salad. And then last but not least, a little bit of walnut. Jackie was saying how healthy nuts are, so we're just going to throw that in. And then with this, I would serve a lovely walnut oil dressing.
Jackie, are you there?
I am, but I wondered if we've got, Rabbi Chapa, have we got any more questions at this point?
Yes, someone has asked actually, what kind of cheese can you use instead of feta?
The best alternative is Lancashire. Or as I said, I use salad cheese, which isn't as salty as feta, but a good sharp Lancashire. You want a crumbly white cheese. But to be honest, if you needed to, you could use some grated strong cheddar or even a bit of Parmesan.
And could I come in at this point, Rabbi Chapa, just because previously we were talking about people who couldn't have eggs and people who couldn't have milk.
Yeah.
So eggs, as I explained, are really important for brain health because of this chemical choline. But other sources of choline include liver, not great for a vegan, but for someone who's dairy-free but does have meat, then liver can be good. And broccoli and cauliflower are also good sources of choline. And for calcium, if you're not having dairy, then other sources include whole grains, and sardines are actually very good because the tiny bones in sardines mean that you get extra calcium from that. And beans, things like butter beans, kidney beans, etc. They're a great source of calcium. But I think if someone's really not able to have any milk products, it is worth from time to time having a blood test through the GP just to see what the calcium levels are up to see if they even need a calcium supplement at all. Judy, I wonder if you have the next video for us of the next stage of our progress.
I do. I'm about to reveal my hortopita at last, having made my salad and my sauce. So let me get that up for you, and here we go.
Can you see that? Just taking it out of the oven. So, because I'm using a loose bottom tin, like you would use for a quiche or anything like that, I'm just going to hopefully take it out. Ooh, come on, there we go. It worked. Yeah, come back. Down, boy. So there is our hortopita pie. I'm going to pop that. I'm going to keep it on its base because there's no reason to take it off. And we're just going to pop it on my little tray here. So I have my salad here, the red, green and gold salad. I've got our lovely little dip here, the tzatziki. I've got the hortopita pie, and I've got my little triangles and spiral. So back to you, Jackie.
Thank you, Judy. And I'm going to screen share again, folks. I do apologize for the bits of time where you're waiting for us to move between screens. For me in particular, Judy's much more IT savvy than I am, so this is all quite a learning curve for me. But here again, this is the illustration of our hortopita. Again, so here's the book. As I said, we're incredibly proud. Well, I've never thought I'd have a book with my name on it, so yeah, I'm delighted. We are, through this book, we are sharing our profits with 3 charities. So these are Save a Child's Heart. There's a hospital in Holland, the Lady Wolfson unit there. They perform open heart surgery in Israel for children who are from underdeveloped nations. And they also train doctors and nurses from these countries. So improving goodwill towards Israel and of course helping the children and their families so much. So Judy and I think it's a wonderful charity. We're also raising money for World Jewish Relief, which is at the moment providing packages of care for elderly Jewish people, not just elderly, but for Jewish people living in poverty in Eastern Europe in particular. They also are providing support to Rohingya Muslims who are stranded in Bangladesh in refugee camps there. And High Cancer Care, which provides support for anybody who is suffering from cancer, after they've had cancer, at any time after they've had cancer, and for their families. So we think those charities are so worthwhile. This is the flyer for our book, and if anyone is interested to buy it, of course we'd be delighted, and we're offering you a 20% discount if you buy direct from the publisher, Hugh Caxton. So the code is on the screen for you, and at the bottom it gives our website as well, the www.lifebooks.com. I think, Judy, is it actually To Life Books?
To lifebooks.com.
To lifebooks.com, sorry, so we've missed out the TO at the beginning.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
And so through that, you'll get the recipe for the Hortopita, you'll get other recipes, and also my blog. So lots of information on there. And as new research comes out, we'll add to it. For example, today there's been something in the papers about that chocolate is good for our hearts, which makes a lot of people very happy. However, what I rate is the really dark chocolate, the 70% plus, which is lower in sugar and lower in fat. And it does help the heart because it's high in antioxidants, but I just try and restrict myself to about a couple of cubes a day of a really strong dark chocolate. At this point, I'm going to go back to Judy for the tasting of the Hortopita.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm laughing because my husband's just nibbling on a piece of very dark chocolate as you said that. He's helping me with the tech. He obviously needed a little bit of a energy boost. Anyway, to conclude, as you know, they say the proof of the pudding is in the eating, or indeed the Hortopita. So here are my Hortopita triangles, and here's my mint and yogurt dip. Hortopita, meat creamy dip mint sauce. And hopefully this is a marriage made in heaven. I'm going to have a little taste. That complements the still and the mint and the crispiness of the pastry, the coolness of the yogurt, and that little herby, dilly, minty thing going on. It is a marriage made in heaven. It's a shidduch. So with that in mind, my mum would always say, always enjoy your food and eat it in good health. So with that, Rabbi, I will hand back to you.
Thank you, Judy. It does look absolutely delicious. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Thank you. Jackie, also thank you for your expert knowledge there. It's fascinating. There's some time for questions, yes?
Yes. If you have time, yes. We have time.
You have time?
We have time.
Okay, so you have a technical question here in the chat. What can you make in it? What can you make it in if you don't have a loose bottom tin?
You can make it in a cake tin. The only reason to use the loose bottom is because it means that you can slide it up, as I showed you. But frankly, you can also serve it in a sort of a quiche dish and just serve it in that and not attempt to take it out at all. So, you know, a cake tin, anything like that, it's fine.
Oh, okay. And you mentioned earlier, you were with the pastry, you were spraying it, spritzing it, as you said, with olive oil spray. You said and traditionally it's done with butter. You said
yes,
now,
melted butter. So you traditionally brush it on with a pastry brush like this. This is a silicone brush.
So the olive oil is a healthier option than the butter. Now, butter and margarine, which one would you say is better?
Jackie, that's one for you.
Okay. So I'm going to surprise people by saying that I prefer butter, though I tend to spread it quite thinly, but butter is a natural product, and as we've said, dairy has calcium, which is good for blood pressure, and it's good against osteoporosis. In contrast, margarine is highly processed. There's been a study which showed that if you have a lot of ultra-processed foods, then it does increase the risk of heart disease, of mini strokes or strokes and of cancer. For example, they're saying that if there's 10% increase in your diet of ultra processed foods, that would include things like potato crisps, sausages, not the fresh ones made by your butcher, but sausages that are packaged and wrapped in thick plastic. Other deli meats also count as ultra processed if they're pre-made and there's preservatives. So fresh is always better. Ultra processed can be damaging. And there's a particular Israeli nutritionist who I follow who is called Professor Iris Shai from Ben Gurion University of the Negev. And she's written a lot about these kind of things. And she says that she herself very much tries to avoid margarine and to avoid processed sausages. So that's the advice that I'm following. If you'll forgive me, just very quickly following on with that, there's also been a recent paper in American College of Journal of the American College of Cardiology. I should be able to remember that because the initials are Jack, like the beginning of my name, Jackie. So there's a Professor Krauss who's very kindly given Judy and me some advice as well. And he's looked at meta-analysis where they put together studies on saturated fats. And his conclusion is that it's looking as though saturated fats, especially dairy fats, aren't increasing, for most people, they're not increasing the risk of heart disease, and that things like sugar and starchy carbohydrates, which I said before can cause inflammation, that they are more risk to the heart. So I feel definitely a little bit of butter over your margarine. And
I'm going to jump in there, and because I can see that there's a couple of questions that I thought I might. Oh, hello?
No, you carry on, Judy. I've seen there's some follow-up questions in the chat.
Okay, sorry. I could see a couple of questions. I thought I'd just answer them super briefly because I'm sure everyone's thinking about the latter part of their evening. One of the questions was, are there any meat recipes in the book? Absolutely. We've got one of my favorites is a chicken and apricot tagine. I'm not sure you can see that, but that's particularly delicious. Great for Rosh Hashanah. Actually, if you watch out for the Jewish Chronicle Rosh Hashanah supplement coming out, you'll get the recipe for that. And, or you might do. Here we've got some lovely meatballs with, these are sneaky. I call them stealthy meatballs because they actually have hidden greens in them. So if you can't get your kids to eat vegetables, you just sneak them into those little crispy meatballs. And there's also one there with there's a Syrian meatballs which have some pine nuts in. So plenty of chicken, not so much on the red meat, but lots of fish, vegan, vegetarian, all that sort of thing. My principle is you shouldn't have to suffer to eat well and healthily. So all the recipes, inspired as they are by Evelyn Rose, are all designed to be delicious and not just good for you, but in a delicious way.
Thank you. A couple other questions in there. What are healthy oils for frying?
Jackie, as you know, is a big fan of extra virgin oil. That is not so great for hot frying, but it's good for gentle sautéing. So it would work fine for our hortopita. If you want to do something very hot, where you're stir frying like a sort of a Chinese thing, there's a lovely Kung Pao chicken. I would use coconut oil because that has a very high smoke point, and it means that you can get it really nice and hot without the oil breaking down into harmful compounds. And for salad dressings, Jackie and I are both big fans of extra virgin olive oil or cold pressed rapeseed. And of course, walnut oil, which is delicious.
That's interesting. There's another question here. What is a good substitute for margarine in baking that's para?
Coconut oil works really well. In fact, we put that in some of our recipes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Anybody else want to raise a hand or put it in the chat facility? Let's see if I can see anybody.
I'm so excited for this book. Me too. All right, my husband's already starting to eat his way through my little triangles now. It proves they're good.
Oh, yes, someone was asking, would you use the same volume of coconut oil as margarine?
Yeah.
So I do find when I'm frying that a little bit of coconut oil seems to go a very long way. So you can just try a tiny amount and see what happens in the pan, because it seems to dissolve and create quite a lot of oil.
Lovely, thanks.
I was just disappearing there to the fridge. So the coconut oil, there we go. So this is the coconut oil when it's solid, and that is essentially something you can just put straight into your pan if you're stir frying. It'll soften it a little bit at room temperature. But if you're cooking, you probably find it needs to be quite soft or even has melted, so that you can blend it in as you would with oil or into your batter. The other thing you can use in batter in many cases is rapeseed oil, and even olive oil works really well. You'll find that is a very good substitute for certain kinds of cakes. And we've got a delicious gluten-free polenta cake with fresh oranges in the book, and we use oil in that. Very classic Mediterranean way of baking.
And with the coconut oil, ideally, again, because I want everything to be as natural as possible, the virgin coconut oil is best.
That's the orange cake I was babbling on about.
Okay, I think final question. We'll start with you, Jackie. What is your favourite recipe?
I think my favourite is we've got a fragrant chicken with oranges, which is absolutely gorgeous. Great for if you have guests for a dinner party.
Lovely, thank you. And Judy?
Oh, I love them all. You know, that's the problem. People say, oh, well, what recipe do you want to make? And I say, but I love them all, because that's why we put them in the book. There's a little over 100 recipes out of probably thousands that I know and that my mum had developed, I've developed over the years. But I do love a chicken liver pate with tarragon and pears. That's a lovely way to start a meal, unless you're vegetarian. I obviously love my hortopita. I love my spirals. I have a lovely purple strudel of purple fruits. Here's my strudel. If you fancy flexing your phyllo muscles, now you've learnt the process of the spritzing. You know, there's just a host of lovely things. Salads, soups, some beautiful borscht. Oh, I don't know. I just love food. So
we can tell, Judy. We can tell.
you think?
So there's been lovely comments in the comment section. For everyone said they really loved the evening. If there's no more questions, I think we'll wrap it up here. And it's just left for me to say to you, Jackie, and to you, Judy, thank you so much for sharing personally that beautiful recipes and all your beautiful ideas as well, and your knowledge on healthy eating. I've got to say that lemon drizzle cake is one of my favorites, as is lemon pavlova. I've got to say a bit of a sweet tooth.
Oh yes, the lemon pavlova. Yes, absolutely. That was the first recipe I learned to make.
Wow. And I remember during my GCSEs being asked a question about baked Alaska. So there you go. But thank you so much. Everyone's seen, if you want to get the book, you've seen the details. I think we'll share that right at the end back on screen, maybe the last thing on the screen. But it just remains for me to say, firstly, again, a huge thank you to you, Jackie, and to you, Judy, for this wonderful, wonderful evening. You've certainly proven that you can eat healthily and eat Jewish food. The Jewish food can be healthy, and as you said, you should enjoy it. So, l'chaim to life. Thank you to all of you for joining us again, and have a great evening. Thank you so much.
L'chaim, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay well and healthy.
And thank you, Rabbi Chapa. Thank you so much for hosting.
Pleasure.